spokesperson, retired Colonel Cyrus Oguna, considers his recovery from COVID-19 last year miraculous. For someone who remained on supplemental oxygen in a high dependency unit for nearly a month, Oguna says his COVID story taught him the importance of oxygen, family, and the desire to live. More than 3 months since recovering from the virus, he still has some of the symptoms. Oguna spoke to Sam Gituku of the harrowing journey of a government official who had been so visible, communicating to the nation on how to keep COVID-19 infections at bay.
On so many occasions, we saw you accompanying the Ministry of Health officials and coming to brief the country on the number of COVID-19 cases now reported, the fatalities, the measures that the government is putting in place to ensure containment, and then we didn't see you. What was happening?
You know, before I went for the test, we had moved around quite a bit, going to various counties with the CS to try and certainly broadcast the containment measures out of Nairobi town. So in one of those outings, I did feel that my body was not necessarily responding to me appropriately. It was giving me signals that all is not well. At that time, we were going to Mombasa. So I went to Mombasa. We were there for about 6 days, going from Mombasa County to Kilifi, then to Kwale, and then we came back to Nairobi, without necessarily, going for any medical checkup. But the body did complain. My appetite was suppressed. I had backache, and then my calf muscles also paining, sweating profusely. When I got to Malindi, something strange did happen to me. Malindi normally would be a very warm environment. But when I got there, I was feeling very cold, especially in the evening hours. Again, at the time, it never really did not strike me that something was really serious, even though the body was complaining. So we went to Hola from Malindi, came back to Malindi, and then traveled back to Nairobi. We got here on a Thursday. Then on Friday, I realized that in addition to the feeling that I had of, ache here, ache there, loss of appetite, but also felt that I was not necessarily happy. I felt that it was unlike me. I could sense that something is not necessarily, clicking together. And it is the same day that I decided to go to Nairobi Hospital for checkup. Inadvertently, I called a friend of mine who is a doctor, people that, of course, I'd worked with before, that I decided to go to Memorial Hospital. The first thing that they asked me is whether I normally, have high blood pressure. And I did say yes, but nothing really serious that would worry anyone. And it was that time that one of the doctors decided, that I should test for corona. Now, upon that decision having been made, then they could not lock me in, because then they did not know whether I was positive or negative. So they gave medications and let me to go home. So I stayed home, and then on Saturday, the results came out. And then they called me and informed me that that is the situation.
And so when that call came telling you that you turned positive, what went through your mind?
Surprisingly enough, it did not strike me as that hard. In fact, even as I was going to the facility, to be admitted, I took a couple of books with me. I took 3 books. And in my mind, if I was going to be in hospital for long, maybe 10 days. At the very most 14. That is what was on my mind, and therefore I took the books to go and read. And why 3 books? Because in case one is boring, then I can change it to another. That was why I went with those books.
Did you read the books?
I did not. If I did, I only read the introduction of one book on the first day that I got to the hospital, and that was it.
What changed?
In the middle of the night on the first day, I woke up in very, very serious pain on my chest. Things just changed suddenly like that. I don't know what really happened, but I woke up somewhere around 4 a.m. I could not call a doctor. I didn't know what to do, gasping for air and breathing with a lot of difficulty and pain. So in the morning at about 5:30 going to 6, when the healthcare workers come to clean the rooms and stuff like that. Then they ask me, how was your night? Just told them I can't breathe, in a very difficult way. This time now, movement started. So they called the doctor. The doctor came in. They took me to an X-ray, which was just nearby. So after the X-ray, I don't know what it did indicate at the time. Mm-hmm. So when they brought me back to the room, then it is the time they put me on oxygen immediately, and then on medication, very strong medication. So from that time on, which was the second day, I was on oxygen until the day I left hospital for 29 days.
What did that feel like? That gasping for air?
A lot of things we take for granted because they happen naturally. We do not necessarily know that there's a lot of interactions in the body that make us move with the relative ease. But what is central to all this is air. The moment you can't have air, then there is not much you can do. Even taking 2 steps is impossible. I'm saying this because the challenge I went through, the pain I endured was horrible. It was like something you not wish anyone to go through, really, because your whole body is screaming. So any effort trying to breathe in, what you feel like there's somebody passing a knife through your chest, is extremely, extremely painful. As the days progressed, I got to understand, that my oxygen level in the body at some point was at 26.
26%? 26%.
From a normal level of 95, 96. This had come down to 26%. Very, very low. But I felt that I needed to push my body. So even with 26% of oxygen, I was still able to move. And it is one of those movements that I went out and failed to get back. When I was moving out of the room where I was, the ward where I was, I had to, remove the oxygen mask and try to use normal oxygen with suppressed vocal lungs. So I went a few doors away, maybe like 2 doors away, into the washroom. They were not necessarily self-contained. And I struggled to get there. So when I had relieved myself, ordinary way, I couldn't get back. So all energy had been exhausted. So I just sat down there. That time the body is screaming for air. So when the body screams for air, some sound that you cannot comprehend, just come from your mouth. Like you cannot breathe with your mouth closed. Your mouth is open. So with that kind of situation, you make some sound that ordinarily you would not make when you're breathing normally. Mm-hmm. So it is out of making such sounds that somebody else heard.
What was the sound like?
Like a pig bleating. Like you're actually groaning. You're actually groaning. So it is that groan that somebody who was passing by heard. So he came in and he found me seated down there. At that time, I did not know what was going to happen if somebody doesn't come quickly enough.
But you could still
I could still be able to see, yes. So he's the one who came in and, hosted me up and assisted me back into my room.
When you are at that point of need, and we've seen it with other patients that have gone through the virus,
yes,
there is a possibility you may recover or you may not.
Yes.
And you know what that means. Or you may recover but still have a lot of difficulty leading life. Those times, do you think of these possibilities?
Yes, such thoughts always go through somebody's mind. But again, you have to stay strong, right? You have to stay strong, and I can tell you this. I think 2 things kept me going. One of them is the mobile phone. People may not necessarily, perhaps, agree to this, but I tell you what, even when I felt pretty weak, I never stopped answering the phone. It would ring, and I would struggle to check who is calling, and I would respond depending on who it is that was calling me. Many of them called me, and I picked the phone and would just disconnect themselves when they heard how I was struggling to speak to them from the other end. That kept me alive. You know, I did not just want to sit there and let everything go. So I think that struggling to keep awake and to keep alive may have contributed, you know, to me coming out of hospital. That is one. But the other one, which perhaps is the most profound, I tend to think that prayer also does work. Why? Because I think, and based again on what I was told by my doctors, they thought I was a miracle. And he told me this, that was the happiest day of his life. And I'm asking Daktari, why is that so? And he told me that, you know, you are a miracle. Now, a doctor telling you that, they must have known where I was and where initially when I was in hospital and where I was now coming out of hospital. Perhaps they did not think I would come out.
During this time of admission, were you in the HDU, ICU, or the general ward?
I was full-time in HDU.
Where was your family in all this, and how did they move with you along the journey?
As a person, I was very lucky. Lucky in the sense that they allowed one member of my family to visit me. You know, they allowed my wife to come to the hospital every single day. She would be on the other side of the window, of course with the window, you know, a bit high. So one of the shutter would be open. So she'd just be telling me, you know, what was happening at home, how the kids are faring on, you know, so that I get to know what is happening. I was not able to talk back, you see. But again, seeing somebody you know so well in that kind of helpless situation, it did have a lot of impact on them, despite of the fact that they were allowed to come. She was allowed to come and visit me.
And here you are, the person who speaks for the government. You're not even able to speak for yourself, and to interact with your family, they have to be on the other side. When all this is done and they've gone home, how did you deal with that loneliness and the silence of the wards with just machines?
It is not easy, and that is really why, you know, we as government have been advising our people to try as much as possible to obey the containment measures, because it is a lonely disease. It is lonely for the patient, but it's also lonely for the family. You know, it's not just the patient alone, because sometimes we tend to look at the patient, but we forget to look at the family. You know, some of the people who perhaps get infected and get isolated in a hospital may be the breadwinners of the family. So when they are out because of the infection, the family gets completely exposed and become vulnerable. So even though they may not be sick in the physical sense, but they are actually sick in the psychological sense. So the family is suffering, the person in hospital is also suffering.
And now 3 months later, how are you feeling?
I must say that there's been a lot of progress based on how I'm feeling, but certainly it takes a bit of time to be able for everything to reset back to what it was before. I still have got challenges, though minor, to be able to engage actively in physical activities, like maybe walking the staircase. Before then, I would run up the staircase, maybe 4, 5, 6 stairs. Right now, I cannot even go 2 staircases without panting. Mm-hmm. You know, that is still an issue that I have to deal with. You know, I think with time it will correct itself. But the other issue, this is again a common thing, is that yes, the taste buds are back, the senses of taste are back. I can be able to taste now, you know, but I cannot smell still.
And what do the doctors say in terms of the impact on your lungs, whether it's damage or what?
From what they're saying, that my lungs were almost, maybe 80%, well, not really destroyed, but had been completely inflamed. So the other about, 20% of either side is what I was using to breathe. Yeah. So when I was to be discharged from hospital, another X-ray had to be taken. In between, there were 2 other X-rays. You know, the first one, and then now another 2 more, and then the last one. Now, the last one was the one that was going to determine whether I was going to be let to go or not. Now, the outcome was much improved, and that was why I was let to go. Now, 2 weeks later, after that, again I went for a review, and the lungs were okay. But you see, there's what the X-ray would show, and there is what you are feeling as a person. Yes, weakness of the lungs may not be reflected on an X-ray.
How much are you still able to do with the NERC, the committee?
I'm a member of NRC, and I'm part of it, and will always be part of it until such a time when it will be disbanded, right? But again, there are also other things that must happen, in the country. There are many programs and policies and initiatives that the government must also be able to communicate to the people. So as the government spokesperson, I must also be able to, work on a program on how these other areas of government communication can also be moved forward.
Government spokesperson Cyrus Oguna, thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your story.
Thank you.
It will be inspiring to many Kenyans, and also offering lessons like what you went through.
Thank you.
Asante.